"You'll be in the inside cabin, Mom. My son and his wife took the suite." That's how she said it, my daughter-in-law. Standing at the cruise terminal in Seattle with a boarding folder tucked under her arm, phone in one hand, sunglasses pushed up into her blowout even though we were indoors under fluorescent lights. She said it the way you'd tell a stranger the restroom is down the hall. Not cruel, just settled, like it had already been decided in some meeting I hadn't been invited to. I asked her to say it again. Not because I hadn't heard, because I wanted to give her the chance to hear herself. "The inside cabin," she repeated, slower, the way you talk to someone who's a little behind. "Deck 3, it's honestly nicer than you'd think. You'll be asleep most of the time anyway, and the suite really only sleeps too comfortably." She smiled. "It just makes sense." The suite she was talking about, the 2-bedroom with the wraparound veranda and the glass-walled sitting room facing the water. I had paid for it. I had paid for all of it. Her flight up to Seattle, my son's. The excursions, the specialty dining package, the drink plans, the spa credits she'd added at checkout without asking. Every dollar of this 11-day trip up the inside passage sat on my card, and had for 4 months. I want to tell you something before I go any further, because I think some of you already know exactly where this is standing on my chest. Have you ever handed over everything you had, for years quietly, without keeping a ledger, and then watched the people you gave it to decide, out loud, in a crowded room, that you were furniture, that you were something to be assigned to storage? I stood there in that terminal and I felt the strangest thing, not rage. Rage would have been easier. It was this flat, cold clarity, like when the power goes out and suddenly you can hear how loud the refrigerator had been the whole time. Let me back up, because I don't want you thinking I'm some fragile old thing who got her feelings hurt at a boat. I'm 76. My husband and I built a hardware business from a single storefront in a town most people can't find on a map. When he passed 9 years ago, I didn't sell it and shrink into a rocking chair the way everybody assumed I would. I ran it. I expanded it to 4 locations, negotiated the lease on all of them, and once stood in a distributor's office in Chicago for 2.5 hours refusing to sign a supply contract until the man across the desk stopped calling me Sweetbreast and started calling me by my last name. I have read balance sheets that would put you to sleep. I have fired people I liked because the numbers said I had to. I do not rattle. I sold the business 3 years ago for a number that let me stop worrying about numbers, and I promised myself the next big thing I spent money on would be something that mattered. This trip was supposed to be that thing. My husband, Harlan, always wanted to see Alaska. Not the cruise brochure version. He wanted to stand on a deck at dawn with a bad cup of coffee and watch a glacier calve into the sea and feel small for once in his life. We never made it. There was always another store, another spring inventory, another reason to push it a year. So when my son mentioned offhand, over dinner last winter, that his wife had always dreamed of an Alaskan cruise, something in me lit up. I heard Harlan. I thought, I'll do it. I'll take the whole family. I'll finally do the thing we never did, and I'll do it surrounded by the people we made. I booked the good cabins on purpose. I'm not a sweet person by nature. I grew up with an outhouse, for heaven's sake. But I thought once in my life, my son should stand on a private veranda with the mountains going by and understand that his father worked for that. I put myself in a suite too, right next door to theirs. A little family cluster on the best deck. I remember the woman on the phone at the cruise line said, "That's a really special way to travel with family," and I got choked up and had to pretend I was sneezing. So no. I did not expect, 4 months later, to be handed a windowless list box near the engine room and told I'd be asleep most of the time. Now, I want to be fair, because being fair is the only way I know how to keep my footing when the ground moves. My daughter-in-law is not a monster. She's organized and ambitious, and she photographs everything. She grew up with very little, same as me, and I think somewhere along the way, she decided that comfort was a thing you had to grab with both hands before someone took it, and that being polite about grabbing it was the same as deserving it. I understood her, is what I'm saying. I'd just never been on the losing end of her math before. Behind the check-in counter, the young man in the Navy uniform had gone very still. He had one of those name tags, Merrick, I think, and the careful posture of somebody who's been trained to not have opinions out loud. His eyes went from my daughter-in-law to me and back, and I watched him decide, with real discipline, to look at his monitor instead. I felt for him. He was maybe 23, and he'd just gotten a front row seat to a thing families usually have the decency to do in the car. My son finally spoke. He'd been standing a step behind his wife the whole time, rolling their matching hardshell suitcases in a slow, absent little arc, the way a man does when he's hoping the conversation resolves itself so he won't have to. "It's really not a big deal, Mom. he said. His voice was smooth. My son has a good voice. He uses it the way other people use a firm handshake. The suite's got the veranda, sure, but you don't even like the cold. You'd be inside anyway. Sloane's right, it makes more sense. And the inside cabins are quieter. Quieter, he said that, about a room next to an engine. I looked at him for a long moment. This man I'd carried to the emergency room at 2 a.m, when he was 4 and burning up. This man whose first business I'd quietly kept from collapsing with $150,000 I called an early inheritance, so he wouldn't feel like he'd been rescued. I paid the hospital bill when the baby, my granddaughter, came 6 weeks early, and their insurance fought them on all of it. I co-signed the mortgage on the house they live in now, the one with the kitchen island bigger than my first apartment. Every single time it had been framed as a small thing. A little help. A bridge. Family pools its resources, my daughter-in-law liked to say, usually right before I found out which resource was mine. And I'd believed it. God help me, I'd wanted to believe it. Because the alternative, that I'd been useful to them the way a bank is useful, warmly, right up until it says no, was a thing I wasn't ready to hold. My daughter-in-law leaned in a little, dropping her voice, the way you do when you're about to be reasonable at someone. Mom, she said, please don't turn this into a thing. It's a room. You'll be sleeping in it. It's 11 days, half of which you'll be off on excursions anyway. It's really not worth getting emotional about. A room. Not worth getting emotional about. I want to tell you what that phrase did, because it's the whole hinge of this. It didn't make me want to cry. It did the opposite. It dried me out. Every excuse I'd ever made for these two. He's stressed. She means well. They're young. They don't understand money the way we did. Every one of them just evaporated, and what was left was a fact so plain it was almost restful. They didn't think of me as a person on this trip. They thought of me as the credit card that had feelings. And the feelings were the inconvenient part. I said, you booked all of this on my account. My daughter-in-law's smile didn't move, but something behind her eyes recalculated. Well, yeah, we're family. It's a family trip. I paid for the suite, I said, both bedrooms. The veranda you're standing here telling me I don't need. You wanted to treat us, she said, and there it was, the little flick of steel under the sweetness. You said so. You said you wanted to do something special, so we're letting you. Letting me. I almost laughed. I'd have respected the honesty if it hadn't been aimed at my chest. My son jumped in, smoothing again. Mom, come on, nobody's trying to be. Look, we can figure out dinner seating and whatever. We can all do the excursions together. It's fine. Sloane just picked rooms. That's all this is. That's all this is. That was the moment I stopped listening to the words and started watching the shape of the thing. Because here is what I'd finally understood. Standing between the roller bags and the ropes and the young man pretending to type. The rooms weren't the point. The rooms were just where it had gotten visible. This had been happening for years, in 100 small assignments, and I'd been so busy being grateful they still called that I never noticed I'd been quietly reseated in my own family, one polite decision at a time, all the way to the back. All right, I said. My daughter-in-law's shoulders came down half an inch. See? It's fine, Merrick. Can we get her the deck 3 key? Give me a minute, I said. I need to move some things around. She assumed I meant my luggage. She turned back to my son and started talking about the muster drill and whether they'd have time for the champagne bar before it, and I stepped a few feet to the side, out of their orbit, and I took out my phone. I opened the cruise line's app. I'd installed it back in the spring, back when I was the woman who cried on the phone about traveling with family. My whole booking was in there. The reservation number, the 4 months of payments, the excursions, the dining, the 2 suites. Everything under my name because everything had been paid by me. I tapped into the reservation. There was a menu, manage booking, modify stateroom, guest details, and near the bottom, in gray undramatic type, remove guest from reservation. I stood there with my thumb hovering over it. I'll be honest with you, because I promised myself I would. A voice came up in me, an old voice, one I'd been listening to my whole life. It said, don't make a scene, you'll regret it. He's your son, she's your family, it's a room. Just take the room, sail the water, look at the glacier, come home and never say a word and everyone will remember you as the good one. That voice had run my life for a long time. It was the voice that co-signed the mortgage. It was the voice that called a rescue an inheritance, so nobody's pride would sting. It was, I realized, the exact voice my daughter-in-law had just used on me. Please don't make this a thing. And I understood in a single clean breath that I'd been saying it to myself for years so that other people wouldn't have to. I thought about Harlan on a deck at dawn with a bad cup of coffee. He would not have taken the inside cabin. He'd have laughed once, loud, the way he did, and then he'd have done something. I looked over. My daughter-in-law was showing my son something on her phone, the two of them heads together, comfortable, certain, already past me. The certainty is what did it. Not the meanness. I could have forgiven mean. It was how sure they were that I would fold, that I always folded. That folding was the entire function I served. I tapped remove guest. The app asked me which one. 3 names came up in a neat little list: alphabetical patient, my son, my daughter-in-law, and me. I selected my daughter-in-law first. A box appeared. Removing this guest will cancel their stateroom occupancy and travel documents. Refund subject to fair rules. Continue? I read it twice. Not because I was unsure, because I wanted to feel it, the way you press on a bruise to know it's real. Then I tapped continue. The little wheel spun. The screen refreshed. Her name was gone from the sailing. I did the same to my son. I want to be clear that I felt no thrill. People think this kind of thing is triumphant. It isn't. It's more like setting down something heavy you've been carrying, so long you'd stop noticing your arms were shaking. My arms were shaking. But I did it standing up. 2 names gone, 1 left, mine. And there, still active, was the suite. The 2 bedrooms. The veranda facing the water. I looked at it for a second and then I did the last thing. I moved my own reservation into the suite. A few taps, confirm change, done. The best room on the ship, the one they'd told me I didn't need, was now mine, exactly and only mine, and it had been mine all along because I was the one who bought it. I put the phone away and walked back over. Okay, my daughter-in-law said, brightening, thinking I'd sorted my bags. So, deck 3. Merrick's got your key. No, I said. I've thought a lot about that word since, how small it is. How I'd spent 30 years finding gentler shapes to pour it into. I'd love to, but that might be hard. Let me see what I can do. And how none of the shapes had ever protected me the way the plain word did in that moment. No what? She said. Your reservations have been canceled, I said. Both of them. You're no longer on the sailing. There's a particular silence that happens when a person's certainty falls out from under them. My son heard it before she did. His face did something I hadn't seen since he was a boy caught in a lie, a flicker, fast before the man's composure came back down over it. What are you talking about? My daughter-in-law said. It wasn't a question, it was a demand for the world to correct itself. You said it was just a room and I shouldn't get emotional, I said. You were right about one thing. I'm not emotional. I'm decided. I turned to the young man behind the counter who had given up all pretense of typing. I'll take the key to the suite. It's under my name. It should be the only name on it now. He glanced at his screen and I watched him see it. The changes live, 3 minutes old. He was very professional. Yes, ma'am, I have you in the owner's suite, single occupancy. A tiny pause. Just yourself. Just myself, I said. My son found his voice. Mom, come on. This is insane. You can't just, okay, look, I get it. You're upset the room thing was dumb. We'll switch. You take the suite, we'll take the inside cabin. It's fine, just. He gestured at my phone, at the counter, at the whole unraveling situation. Just put us back on. Call them. Fix it. We flew all the way up here. And here's the part I need you to hear, the part I keep turning over. He said we'll take the inside cabin. In the space of 4 minutes, once cost him something, the inside cabin was suddenly livable. Fine, even. All that talk about how it made sense for me to be tucked away by the engine. It had never been about sense. It had been about who they thought could be told to go there. You can absolutely fix it, my daughter-in-law said, recovering, pivoting to briskness because briskness was her armor. Merrick, can she add us back? She added us in the first place. She can just, the guest who made the booking can modify it, he said carefully. But I can't reinstate a canceled fare without the reservation holder authorizing it and repurchasing at current rates. There's availability, but the sailing's tomorrow, so it'd be same-day pricing. Then repurchase it, she said to me, like she was ordering coffee. I looked at her, really looked, and I felt, of all things, a little tired on her behalf because she still didn't understand what had changed. She thought this was a tantrum with a price tag, and if she just named the price loud enough, the money would appear the way it always had. No, I said again. You're seriously going to leave us standing at a cruise terminal, she said. Her voice climbed. A couple with a stroller slowed down to not watch us. After we came all this way? For a room? You're going to embarrass your own son over a room? I'm not embarrassing anyone, I said, and I meant it, and I think that's what unsettled her most. That I wasn't loud, wasn't shaking a fist, wasn't giving her the ugged scene she could tell people about later. I'm just not paying for the version of this trip where I'm treated like cargo. That version's canceled. There's a different version available, but it doesn't have you in it, and I'm at peace with that. My son tried once more, quieter, stepping close, using the good voice, the one that had gotten him out of things his whole life. Mom, you don't mean this. You're not the kind of person who does something like this." And that right there was the truest thing either of them said all day, and it was wrong. Because for 40 years, he was right. I wasn't the kind of person who did something like this. That's exactly how we'd all ended up at this counter. I'd built my entire self around being the person who didn't, who absorbed it, who smoothed it over and picked up the check and told everyone it was fine. I used to not be, I told him. I've decided to be. I picked up my bag, just the one, my old canvas weekender that Harlan bought me in an airport in 1994 and that I've refused to replace out of stubbornness and love. And I took the key card the young man slid across the counter, and I said thank you to him by name, because he'd been decent in a moment when nobody around him was. Then I did one more thing. I took my phone back out. For a second, my daughter-in-law thought I was reinstating them. Her whole face reorganized toward relief. I wasn't. I was calling my granddaughter. My granddaughter, Nell, lives in Seattle. That's part of what makes this ache, if I'm honest. I hadn't invited her on the trip. Not because I don't love her most of all. I do, and I'm not supposed to say that, but I'm 76 and I'll say what's true. But because when I was booking, my daughter-in-law had steered the whole thing, and Nell somehow never made the list. There wasn't room in the plan, I was told. Nell's busy with grad school. Nell wouldn't want to. Nell, always a reason. And I, the great softy, the woman who runs distributors ragged in Chicago, I let it go because it was easier than a fight. Nell picked up on the second ring. "Grandma, everything okay? Aren't you supposed to be boarding?" "Sweetheart," I said, "how fast can you pack for 11 days? There was a beat of silence and then, God love her, she laughed, a real startled, delighted laugh. "Wait, are you serious? What happened?" "There's been a change of plans," I said, watching my daughter-in-law's face go from confusion to comprehension to something close to fury. "There's a suite with 2 bedrooms and a veranda leaving tomorrow morning, and I'd like the person I actually enjoy to be in the other room. Your grandfather always wanted to see Alaska. I think we should go see it for him." Yes. Oh my God, Grandma, yes. I can be at the pier tonight. I'll figure out class. I don't even care. Yes. Bring a warm coat," I said. "And that bad camera you love. We're going to stand on a deck at dawn and freeze, and it's going to be perfect." I hung up. My daughter-in-law was staring at me like I'd grown a second head, and my son had gone quiet in a way I recognized. The quiet of a man doing arithmetic he doesn't like. He understood numbers, my son. He always had. And the numbers were finally telling him a story his good voice couldn't reframe. 2 canceled fares, a trip evaporating, a suite going to the granddaughter they'd left off the list, and a mother, a bank, a bridge, a resource, walking toward the water with 1 canvas bag and no intention of turning around. "You're taking Nell," my daughter-in-law said. Flat, disbelieving. "I'm taking someone who's never once told me where I'm allowed to sit," I said. I didn't say it cruelly. I want you to know that. There'd been enough cruelty for one morning, and none of it mine, and I didn't want to start now just because I'd finally been handed the power to. I just said the true thing and let it land. My son said, "Mom, can we just talk about this? Not here. Can we get coffee? We can talk," I said. "In a couple of weeks. When I'm back. When you've had some time to figure out why the inside cabin was fine for you the second it was you." I softened because he's my boy, he'll always be my boy, and being finished with a behavior is not the same as being finished with a person. "I love you. I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm doing it because I finally believe I'm allowed to." He didn't have anything for that. For once, neither of them did. I turned and walked toward the doors, and the terminal did what the world always does. It just kept going. Family argued about a lost passport. A man in a Hawaiian shirt in 50-degree weather asked someone where the ship photographer was. An announcement chimed about boarding groups. Nobody's world had ended. Just one small, quiet arrangement had rearranged itself, the way they do, without alarms. I got a car to a hotel by the water, and I sat by the window and watched the ships lit up along the pier, and I did not feel triumphant, and I did not feel guilty, and I want to tell you honestly what I did feel, because I think some of you have been waiting your whole lives to feel it, and are afraid it's not allowed. I felt like myself. Not the useful version, not the smoothing it over version, not the woman who says I'd love to but so nobody ever has to hear her say no, just me. Harlan's wife, the woman who ran the distributor ragged, 76 years old, and finally, at long last, in the good room. Nell showed up at the hotel that night with a duffel bag and a coat, 2 sizes too big and her hair still wet, breathless and grinning, and she hugged me so hard she knocked the air out of me, and she said, "I can't believe you did that." And I said, "Neither can I, honestly." And we laughed until we couldn't, and it was the first time I'd laughed like that since before my husband died. We sailed the next morning. The suite was ridiculous and beautiful, and far too big for 2 women and 1 canvas bag, and we didn't feel guilty about a square inch of it. On the 4th day, at dawn, I stood on the veranda in the cold with a truly terrible cup of coffee, and a glacier the color of old bottle glass cracked and dropped a piece of itself into the sea, with a sound like the world clearing its throat, and Nell took a blurry picture of it. And I cried, finally, the good kind, and I told her about her grandfather. And she listened the way you listen to someone you've decided is worth every minute. My son texted me on the 6th day. I've been thinking about the room thing. I'm sorry. It was worse than I let myself see. I didn't answer right away. Not to punish him. To let it be real. To not smooth it over on reflex the way I would have my whole life. When I did answer days later, I said, "Thank you for seeing it. We'll talk when I'm home." There's a lot to say. And there is. Some of it will be hard. But he reached out first, on his own, with no room being taken from him to force it. And that's the first time in a long time I've had reason to hope for him. His wife hasn't said anything. Maybe she won't. I've stopped organizing my life around which. People think standing up for yourself is a loud thing. A speech. A slammed door. For most of my life I thought so too, and because I couldn't imagine being loud, I told myself I couldn't stand up at all. But it wasn't loud, in the end. It was a few taps on a phone at a counter in Seattle, and one small word said plainly, and a granddaughter with wet hair and a coat too big, and a glacier at dawn. It turns out the whole time I'd been waiting for permission I already had it. I'd just been giving it to everyone else. I don't know exactly how your version of this looks. Maybe it's a room. Maybe it's a seat, a chore, a favor, a phone call you always make and never get. But there's someone in your life who's decided you're the resource and not the person. I'll tell you the one thing I learned standing between the roller bags and the ropes. Respect doesn't come from how much you give. It comes from the moment you're finally willing to stop. I gave for 40 years and got assigned to deck 3. I stopped for 4 minutes and got a glacier at dawn. So tell me, and I mean it, I read these. Have you ever been quietly moved to the back of your own family? What did you do? Or what do you wish you'd done? I'd rather hear from you than have you sit alone with it. And if this found you at the right time, stay a while. There are more of these, and I think you and I have a lot in common.